Hello and welcome back to Inmr. Today I'm going to be doing my Premier League prediction for the 2023-24 season. We're only a few days out from the season, so in today's podcast I'm going to be going through who I think is getting relegated, who's getting into Europe, and of course who is going to win the Premier League this year. I'm taking into account players that have been bought in, sold, squad depth, potential 11s, everything. I've looked into every little bit to try and make this as accurate as possible. Of course, you can't get everything right. Anyone that would have done a prediction last year never would have said, oh yeah, Newcastle top 4, Chelsea 12th. There are always going to be a few surprises, but hopefully what I've come up with is going to be as accurate as possible. But of course, there's always going to be a few surprises. So without further ado, I'm going to get into my prediction for this season. Starting off with 20th, I've gone for Luton Town. I don't think many people are going to argue with that. I do think they're going to finish rock bottom of the Premier League. In terms of the players they've bought in, they've got Giles and Kabore in on loan, improving both fullback areas. Tom Lockyer, the captain, is going to be a key player for them. He's good on the ball and reads the game really well. Although their backline's looking fairly good for a team that's just been promoted, they have kept faith in a lot of the squad. They haven't made a lot of changes from what it was in the Championship, which in my opinion shows a bit of a lack of ambition. Yes, you want to sort of give rewards to the players that have got you to that point. You want them to have their moment in the Premier League, but also as a club you want to stay in the Premier League. And not making enough changes is potentially going to cost them. Going forward as well, they've got Morris and Adebayo up top. Morris did really well last season, 20 goals in the Championship. Adebayo, on the other hand, only got 7. So in the Premier League, are they just going to be relying on Morris to get the goals? Luton are obviously going to be conceding a lot. I think everyone's going to see that coming. But if they're going to be conceding a lot, they need to be scoring more. And if you've only got one striker who's reliable, if he's having an off day, you look next to Adebayo, who hasn't been as consistent in front of goal. But as I said, it's not like they're going to bring another striker in. They're keeping faith in the players that got them there. So this could pose an issue throughout the season. So yeah, rock bottom of the Prem, back down to the Championship. I've gone for Luton Town. Moving on to 19th, it's another newly promoted side. They've been in the Premier League before. It is Sheffield United. Obviously, I said about Luton having a lack of ambition. I think Sheffield United top that lack of ambition. They've sold their best player in Inmr and Dye, 14 goals and 10 assists last season. 1 year left in his contract. I think they should have just let him see that contract out and then leave. They've replaced him with Traore. He's a 20-year-old who got 15 goals and assists in 14 games in, I believe, the Swedish league last season. But although he seems like he's got potential, the Prem is such a different level. They've also been linked with Zian Fleming. He had a really good debut season last year at Millwall, and he could slot in that cam position, as you can see on the potential 11. But overall, I think losing Dye is going to cost them a lot. Final club that I think is going to get relegated is Nottingham Forest in 18th place. They've brought in Elanga from Man United. Obviously, he wants lots of game time, and I think that Forest are going to be able to provide him that. And that actually does make a really good front three of Elanga and Johnson on the wing, with Awanini up front. However, I don't think their defence is good enough. They struggled last season. Obviously, there's still time in the transfer window. Things can happen very quickly. With some of these 11s, you'll see that actually since making them, clubs have now signed a player that will go in their spot. But at the moment, looking at this Nottingham Forest back line, I'm not too impressed. Although they've got a really good front three, Johnson is linked with a move away. They need to hold on to him if they want any hope of potentially escaping the drop. But I do think, if not now, we could see him make a move in maybe January. After last season, they needed to make more improvements, in my opinion. And so far, I haven't seen enough. So if they don't act fast over the next few days, they could suffer massively, and I do think that they're going to go down this season. 17th, I've put Bournemouth, just escaping relegation. I think bringing in a new manager is a massive risk. I think the previous manager actually did a really, really good job. Left-hand side's looking really good. Obviously, Kirkes and Kluivert have been bought in. The right is a little bit weaker. However, I'm looking forward to seeing Kluivert, as he is very versatile, and he could play on that right-hand side. And having a player like that can cover lots of positions is going to help Bournemouth, and potentially could be what keeps them up. Traore in midfield with Billing looks promising, but they do need a new CDM. They haven't replaced Lerma as of yet. They're linked with a bunch of wingers, but not enough CDMs in my opinion. I think they need to be focusing on replacing Lerma. He did really, really well last season. They're going to miss him, especially if they don't find a replacement, because at the minute, there's not enough quality in that midfield. 16th, I've gone for Crystal Palace. Franca and Lerma are good signings. Obviously, Franca was highly sought after by Chelsea, but Crystal Palace ended up beating them to his signature. They are also linked with Damari Gray to be Zaha's replacement. I think they massively need that done. Gray wants to move. He's got a lack of game time at Everton. He's only 12 million, around about that. So I think it would be a good signing, but once again, need to get it done. I think the reason they're going to finish so low is because of their key players that are leaving. They've just lost Zaha, was their best player for a very long time. Elise is linked with a move away. Eze is going to need to be in top form. They're going to be really, really reliant on him this season, I think. He's the only sort of amazing player that is solid to stay, and with that they're going to rely on him a lot because other good players, their future at the club isn't certain. 15th, I've gone for Wolves. They've lost a few really good players over the summer already. Connor Cody, Nathan Collins, Ruben Neves, and of course Raul Jimenez, who hasn't had much of a chance in recent years, but we all know how good he was before his unfortunate head injury. Traore has come back from loan. He's a young midfielder who could do a good job in taking over in Ruben Neves' position, but nowhere near as much quality as Neves. Doherty, of course, is back. He'll be hoping to return to his old form at Wolves. Obviously, he dropped off a little bit once signing for Spurs and Atletico Madrid, so hopefully coming back to Wolves. It's a fresh start, but also he's coming back home. In terms of players they're looking to bring in, Aaron Cresswell is highly linked with them. His 9 years at West Ham looks to be coming to an end, and he wants to move to Wolves himself. And I think if the player wants it, it's always likely that it's going to happen. Southampton are also ready to start negotiating for Che Adams. He looks like he could be their new striker. And I do think, Premier League proven, he is a talented player. And I think in a front three with Podence and Neto, they could get the best out of him. Improving the midfield has been something Wolves really want to do. Unfortunately, their prime target, Alex Scott, looks like he's going to be stolen by Bournemouth. Young midfielder, they offered 20 million, it was rejected, and Bournemouth came in with a bid of 25, so it looks like they're going to miss out on Scott. However, now they are linked with Jordan James, 19-year-old midfielder from Birmingham. He made 33 appearances last season. He's getting that game time, he's adapting to men's football really quickly. He's a more financially friendly option, which I think Wolves do need. But overall, there's a bit of a lack of quality in the midfield. They haven't really replaced the players that they've lost well enough. Moving on to 14th place, I've gone for Everton. They've finally got Danjuma to lead the line after obviously being caught out by Spurs in the January transfer window. He's going to lead the line. I think he's better suited to Everton rather than Spurs, so he probably will get a few more goals and overall just a better game. They've brought in the experienced Ashley Young, played loads last year, obviously got into the first team over a much younger Matty Cash. Still got it, and I think his presence in the changing room will be really good for them this season. Looking at it, it's actually quite a strong squad on paper, but that doesn't always translate onto the pitch, as we saw last year. Another player they're looking at bringing in is Tete from Shakhtar. It looks like his contract is going to be terminated, which means Everton could get him on a free. They just need to make smart signings that don't break the bank. 13th is Burnley. Of course, they won the championship last year. I actually think they're going to do quite well in their first season back. I'm really excited to see them. This is a totally new side, obviously with Kompany as manager. Last time we had Sean Dyche, they're going to play a totally different style of football. Brownhill's captain did really well in midfield last year. It just provides an additional threat going forward. They've brought in James Trafford. He's going to get plenty of minutes, and I do think this is going to stop them conceding, which is obviously a massive issue with teams that get promoted. They concede so many goals. He did really well in the Under-21s World Cup. He did really well in this loan spells, and I do think now is his chance in the Premier League to show what he can do, and I do believe he's going to be very successful in this Burnley side. In terms of players they're linked with, Hartman from Feyenoord seems to be the favourite. They need a left back. Charlie Taylor is currently their only option in that position, so bringing him in is going to be really important. Obviously, Ian Martson has gone back to Chelsea after his loan spell, did really well in the Championship last season. And I do think Hartman would be a great replacement, and Burnley are actually the favourites over West Ham. They've brought in some good players. There's nothing you can do about loan players going back to their parent club, but I think the players that they've been replaced with are going to do a job as well. So I think 13th for Burnley would be a very successful season. In 12th, I've gone for West Ham. They'll be hoping to have a much better season than they did. In 12th, I've gone for West Ham. They're hoping to build on what was a pretty good end to last season. Obviously in Europe they did really well. Premier League, not so much. Stuck in that relegation battle for quite a long time. Declan Rice's departure makes this season very tricky. They're going to need a new captain in that centre midfield. He's done so well for so many years. They have been linked with James Ward-Prowse. They've made a take it or leave offer of 30 million. He would be a good replacement in that midfield. Inter Milan linked with Scamacca, who hasn't really impressed for West Ham at all since joining, and West Ham would like Folarin Balogun as a replacement. Arsenal want around 45 million, which I think is quite fair considering what he did in Ligue 1 last season. In terms of left back position, obviously as we said, Cresswell is on his way out. They're looking at Bristol City left-back Cameron Pring, and they have just in the last hour or so confirmed that Edson Alvarez is going to be joining. So it does look like they're going to be improving that back line. But of course, if there's no Declan Rice replacement, I do think they're going to struggle in the middle of the park and get dominated. This will be, I think, a building season. In 11th, I've gone for Fulham. They had a really, really good season last year, which they'll be hoping to build on, but I do think they're going to stay around about in the same position in the league. They're giving Raul Jimenez a fresh start. Calvin Bassey has also joined from Ajax for 18.2 million. Great signing, left-footed centre-back, which obviously most Premier League clubs are desperate for nowadays. They've offered Chelsea 4 million for Callum Hudson-Odoi. The negotiations are advanced, but Chelsea want double that. They want 8 million. I do think he'd suit Fulham really well. Fulham want him as they don't really want to rely on Willian anymore. He's past his best at 34 years old. Yes, he did a great job last season, but you don't want to be relying on a player who's 34 years old. So bringing in a younger player with more potential, I think is really going to help them. So hopefully that deal gets done, because I think the clubs and the players do want it done. They did do really well last season, as I said, and I do think they're going to maintain that level. So 11th for Fulham. Into the top half of the table then, I've gone for Brentford in 10th. Nathan Collins been bought in for around 23 million, I believe. I think he's going to pair really well with Ethan Pinnock. That's a really strong back line looking at it. Kevin Schade is now signed permanently for 20 million. He's going to have to fill Tony's boots for the first half of the season, so he'll be hoping that he can do a job, and I think he potentially will. And once he's in that starting lineup consistently, I feel like he couldn't really get going last year with his loan move because he was never really consistently in it. Tony had that place, but now that he is pretty much their only option up top, I think he could get going and be quite a consistent striker. In terms of links, they've got Mike Trezor and Brennan Johnson. If those two happen, once Tony's back, that's going to be an unbelievable front three. Trezor's from Genk. He's getting a lot of attention after his season last year. He got 8 goals and 24 assists in 42 appearances, which is why I think Kevin Schade's going to get plenty of chances this year. You've got Trezor out on the left, setting up loads of chances for Schade, so I do think Brentford are going to score quite a lot of goals. Brennan Johnson, this has been a 2-year pursuit with Nottingham Forest. They've put in a record bid of 40 million. They put in 30 on the first day of the window. Forest want 50. 45 they could get it done, and I do think that'd be a really, really good signing for Brentford, and he'd definitely suit their style of play. In 9th, I've gone for my team, Brighton. Our goalkeeper situation, of course, Sanchez is out to Chelsea for 25 mil, and we bought in Bart van Bruggen for 16.2. He suits De Zerbi's style of play much more. Obviously, Sanchez was being dropped out of the squad for Jason Steele last season. We've also brought in Igor from Brazil. He's a left-footed centre-back, of course, with Colwill committing his future to Chelsea. He's done a 6-year deal with the option for a further 12 months, I believe. Poch has said that he believes he's going to be one of the best centre-backs in the world at some point. Igor is quite similar in terms of physical and aerial presence to Colwill, but not as much talent and not as much potential, but he's still going to be a very good replacement, partnered up with Dunk. Alexis McAllister as well has gone to Liverpool for 35 million, absolute bargain in my opinion, but he's been replaced by Kudus from Ajax. Really excited to see him come in. It looks like that deal is a couple of days away. Maybe by the time this is out, it would have happened. So looking at that midfield, of course, Caicedo's a bit of a 50-50 one, but Caicedo, Dahoud and Kudus in that midfield looks really promising. Of course, we've got a lot of depth in midfield as well. Front three, record signing João Pedro. On the right, Matoma on the left, Ferguson up front. It's looking very good. The only issue I'm seeing at the minute is right back. Lamptey and Veltman aren't good enough in my opinion, and Gross does a job there, but he's out of position. We've got Milner who can play there. If we can get Kudus and then potentially get a right back of higher quality, we should be good to go. The only thing I'm a little bit worried about is our squad depth. We've just sent Jeremy Sarmiento out on loan to West Brom. In my opinion, a bad decision. With the Europa League this season, we're going to need a lot of squad depth. We came in 6th last year. I do think 9th we're going to drop off a little bit just because we're going to have all these extra games. Potentially our focus would shift a little bit from the league, more focused on Europa League competition. It's totally new for Brighton, never been in a situation like this before. So I do think they're going to drop off a little bit in the league, but I do think we're still going to have a fairly successful season. In 8th, I've gone for Aston Villa. I think Brighton and Villa are very much equal in terms of ability, sort of what they're doing at the minute. They've done really well. You know, they've got some really good players in there. They've sold players for a lot of money. They're very similar, I think, in what they're doing as a club, both on the pitch and off the pitch. But I think the signings that they've done really, really smart business, which is why I think they're going to finish a little bit higher. They've bought in Pau Torres, Mushdiaby, Yuri Tillemans. If they continue with these smart signings, I think they're going to be looking really good in terms of Premier League and in Europe. They're linked with Adama Traore and Fernan Torres. Adama's going to be on a free from Wolves. If that were to happen, I think he'd be perfect under Unai Emery. Ferran Torres, I think they prefer him, but it's a massive uphill battle with Barcelona, and I do think Adama's the more realistic option. It's an impressive looking squad, but as I said, they're going to have lots of games this season, same as Brighton, but I still think they're going to be very successful. 7th, I've gone for Tottenham. They've brought in Kulusevski permanently, James Maddison and Vicario. Maddison's massively bolstered that midfield, in my opinion. Looking at their squad, it's quite impressive. Put Adarabioyo in centre-back, but literally 20 minutes ago it's been announced that Mickey van der Ven has signed, so he'll obviously be in that centre-back position paired up with Romero, which is looking really good. I think there's still a lot to work on. It's looking like a pretty good squad. I can't see them getting into the top 4, even the top 6 this season. Yeah, I'm not expecting too much from them. I think it's going to be quite a disappointing season. In 6th, I've gone for Newcastle. I do think they're going to fall a little bit from last season just because they're going to be playing in the Champions League. Very impressive year last year, and I do think they're going to build on that and still get European football. Barnes and Tonali are very strong signings. They're going to be really good in that Champions League setup. It's a massive statement from Newcastle bringing both those players in. Another big statement is the 82 million bid they've put in for Kavica Kvaratskhelia. They're looking to bring in the Napoli man to replace St. Maximin. He obviously went to Saudi Arabia for 23 million. If it's not Kvaratskhelia, the next option is Chiesa. Liverpool want him, but Newcastle have the advantage of UCL football and, of course, the massive wages that they offer to players. Barnes, Chiesa and Isaac up front looks really, really promising. They've also just signed Tino Livramento, which means they're going to have plenty of depth. This window has been a big statement for Newcastle to show what they want going forward. This isn't just a few-year thing where their owners are going to spend some money, do well, get into the Champions League and fall off. This is building for the future. In 5th then, just missing out on Champions League football, I've gone for Liverpool. They've brought in Szoboszlai and McAllister for 60 million and 35 million respectively. Losing Henderson, Firmino and Fabinho is going to massively cost them this season. I think that is why they're going to miss out on the top 4. They're lacking that midfield depth that they had in abundance last season. Calvin Phillips, Gravenberch, Amrabat, Lavia and Valverde are the 5 players they're looking at bringing in. They put in a 51 million bid for Valverde, had that rejected. 40 million for Lavia, had that rejected. They're running out of time. As I said, season starts in a matter of days. Once these clubs get started, they're not going to start wanting to cart players off to other clubs. Of course, they've still got good options. You know, Curtis Jones is potentially going to get his chance in the starting lineup. He's not experienced enough, and that's a brand new midfield we're looking at. That's central three. Never played with each other before this season. Obviously, they've done pre-season together, but that isn't long enough in my opinion. All individually really good, but whether or not they gel is another question entirely. And most importantly, Cody Gakpo needs to be in form this year, or they definitely won't get UCL football. I don't think they will. I can't see him being in good enough form. Once again, on paper, looks unbelievable. I don't think it actually is going to be nearly as good as it looks. There's just question marks all around this Liverpool side. Just squeezing in to Champions League qualification, I've gone for Chelsea, which I think is going to surprise quite a few people after the shambolic year they had last season. Under Poch, they're going to do so much better. Keeping Colwill is going to be key for them. That back line looks really solid. He's world class in my opinion, as we said before. 6-year deal, and it's not like he's totally missing out on that Brighton experience because he's going to have Bob Sanchez in goal, as well as potentially Caicedo in the midfield. I do think that Sanchez starts over Kepa. Caicedo, I've put him in the Brighton and the Chelsea squad. I've done that with a couple of players just because it's so 50-50, it's so down the middle on what's going to happen. I do think they're going to have to pay the 100 million if they want him. As I said before, far too much. But in my opinion, all they can do to get him is pay up. And Nkunku and Jackson look really good in pre-season. Unfortunately, Nkunku has got injured last night. Jackson especially, though, has surprised me. Maybe he can slot in now. Chelsea have also offloaded Deadwood and made money from it. Havertz, 65 million. Kovacic, I think, was 30. And obviously Mason Mount was about 60 as well. It's a massive fresh start. It looks like they're going to be signing Vlahovic from Juve have offered a swap deal for Romelu Lukaku, who obviously wants that permanent switch to the Serie A. Vlahovic is only 23 years old, and I think Poch is the manager to get the best out of him. Mudryk and Madueke really impressed me towards the end of last season. Mudryk, we know he can do well. He just needs to build confidence. I do think that they're going to do really well this season. And of course, with no Europe, they're only going to be focused on the league. In third, I've gone for Manchester United. They've brought in Højlund, Mount and Onana. Good business, very necessary in my opinion. And similar to Chelsea, they have offloaded. And they're looking to also get rid of a few more players, including Harry Maguire, Scott McTominay, with West Ham looking to sign the United pair. I just think they need to reinforce the backline a little bit. Ten Hag has said that Dallow's not good enough. There is no official bid yet for a new right back, but they are linked with Benjamin Pavard, who we all know is an outstanding player. Exciting times for United as well as Chelsea. I think they've both got seasons that are going to be quite happy with. Into second place then, just missing out on the Premier League trophy for the second year in a row. I've gone for Arsenal. I think they're going to have just a few, maybe even one or two more seasons of heartbreak. They've brought in Havertz, Timber and Rice, and the key player leaving was obviously Granit Xhaka, but what an upgrade bringing in Rice to replace him. He's great in midfield. I do think Havertz, obviously looking at this potential 11, I think him playing deeper is going to be so much better. And up front, you don't want to be relying on him to score goals. I don't think he's clinical enough. I don't think he's a striker. It's a strong side and they're looking at getting more depth, but I think another year of heartbreak is coming up for Arsenal, which of course leads me on to the final team, top spot, champions of the Prem this year, Manchester City, inevitably. There's no one else you can really go for. They've brought in some really good players. Kovacic has come in to replace Gundogan, which isn't good enough in my opinion. However, with now Gvardiol coming in, Stones can play in that midfield spot instead of Kovacic. Have Gvardiol in centre-back. That is a spectacular midfield. Stones, Rodri, KDB. I think Gvardiol is going to excel under Pep. They're keeping faith in Rico Lewis this year. I do think João Cancelo isn't going to get many minutes. As I spoke about much earlier on in the podcast, Elise is being linked as the Mahrez replacement. City are willing to pay 50 mil, which I think is pretty fair. I don't think anyone is going to argue with City coming first. They continue to be a joke with world-class players on the pitch and the bench. And I do think they're going to dominate the league again. So that is my predicted Premier League table. I'm sure come May there's going to be a bunch of surprises that no one could have predicted, but I'm pretty confident that that's going to be about right, and that is where I'm going to end the podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back soon with another one.